Welcome to part 3 of gamifying the financial lit classroom. This one is getting out of the rat race. There's 2 things that the students are going to try to do this time. They're going to try to build their investment account so they have more money to spend. Then they're going to put that money to work in something that provides them passive income. So there's a couple ways that they can build that investment pot, and one of them is through the stock market. So they can do the stock market simulation, and then here's some stock market resources that I give them. They when we did it, it was a down market, and it was correcting. FinViz is one of the tools that I give them. It's great because it shows them visually what's happening. Green's good, red's not good, and it shows losers and gainers, and so they were able to do that. So in the stock market, as they're buying stocks, they're going to record the companies and all the data in here, whether it was a gain or a loss. And then they'll show that gain or loss and then be able to add that to their account that they have to spend. With real estate, the way to make some money, quick money, is to do flipping. And so they'll look for properties where they could make improvements. They have to figure out the cost of the improvements and be able to justify the reasons they could sell it for more. They do so by finding 2 comparable properties in the neighborhood that are offered or selling for more than theirs, and then they would put the price that they would ask or offer, and then the potential price that they think they can sell it for. I'm the one that would buy it from them, so I kind of lead and guide them through this process and have them think through things and help them. They kind of go through the process of figuring out which's most important, and then they get a gain, and that gain then becomes money that gets added to their account. So one of the tools that they used was Realtor.com, and we did a search for less than usually $30,000 to $50,000, $60,000. I made a rule that they had to buy their flips with cash, because the closing costs would make it not worth it with the timing of needing to be able to fix it and then quickly sell it. So most of it in that price range, most of what they were finding is manufactured homes. And so they would go through the pictures like you're seeing here and look for improvements that they would need to make to be able to get more out of it, sell more. They would document those and figure out the costs. Another thing that they did is so then they looked for real estate properties, ones that had rental histories that they could rent out. And they came up with 2 things. So they had monthly rentals and vacation rentals. And they ended up finding some really interesting ideas and concepts, and they really liked the idea of this tiny house because that's kind of their generation. They found ways to build them for cheaper, and they ended up, a lot of them coming up with, they found property that was zoned multifamily or had multifamily next to it that they could get the city to give them the ability to do a multifamily development. I kind of helped them through that, how that works. And then they figured out the costs of building these tiny homes, and they ended up with like 450 to 550 square foot homes. And they did a couple of things. Some of them, they did them as rentals. They figured out how much they could rent them for based on the square footage. Others found that they came up with ideas of doing vacation rentals, and they found some properties where they could do several of these tiny homes and do them as vacation rentals, and they would have to use, because the vacation rental includes a lot of this property management fees, that's where theirs is going to be lower at 15%, and they can manage, they aren't as likely to have repairs and problems that they do in the monthly rentals. So they learned to adjust all that and figure out all their costs, their building costs and their infrastructure costs, and figure out the square footage and how many homes they could put on that piece of property. They did all of that. They figured it all out. Then they figured out they had to do a 20% down was my rule of thumb, and then they had to use a mortgage calculator to figure out how much their payment on taxes and insurance would be. Then their net income was their rental income subtracting those expenses and their payment, and then they calculated their ROIs. Is a good ROI, and they were looking for ROIs like what they had gotten in the game. So that was this area is their passive income, and that's where they were looking to make cover their expenses. Another one that they could do was to create a business, and so they came up with the different problems they would solve and how they would solve it and their logo, and they had to create a pro forma. And their pro forma was basically their startup costs and their income, where would they get their income, and then figure out month, 2 months, and then as they go, how would they grow. They had to have a plan for how they would improve it, and they had to be able to justify their market, how much they thought they could sell reasonably, recognizing that it takes a little while to get things started. Then once they got their business going, then they could have their passive income coming. And so they were just hoping to get their passive income up here by the last month or the end of the semester, when it was up high enough that it would cover their expenses as well as with their real estate. So that's really what they did. They spent a lot of time figuring things out. They had to do a lot of math. They learned how to do equations and spreadsheets to calculate everything for them. And then they recorded their passive income in the last sheet. This is where, like I said, a lot of creativity, a lot of work. I had one student that she said, "Mrs. Jones, I'm not going to tell you that we're ready, because I've already done that 5 times. So I'm going to tell you that we're ready for you to look at it again." Because they kept leaving things out and forgetting things, and I just had to keep asking them about things. And so, for example, the idea that they had is they found a company in Salt Lake that takes plastic and returns it back into a gasoline state, and sort of really affordable process, and they paid for a certain amount. They paid for per poundage of plastic. So they found cities that were not participating in this, and their idea that they had researched and figured out was to go get their plastic and to take it to Salt Lake, and they had to figure out how much plastic they could fit in a cubic space, and how much their trucks could haul, and how much, all of those things, how much they could make out of it, and trying to reduce their expenses for the number of runs they would have to make to Salt Lake. And they ended up figuring out that they could do plastic shredders, and how many shredders, at what rate could the shredders shred, so that how long would it take them, how many shredders would they need to maximize their ability to get enough plastic to get it down to Salt Lake and make it work. And they still were doing this like on a Saturday, because they were all still keeping their full-time jobs. And so this was just a side business that they were starting, and so they had a lot of math calculations to do. There's a whole bunch of ideas that the kids came up with. Anyway, so that's pretty much what it was. And they were able to, through businesses and through real estate, they were able to get their passive income and get out of the rat race. So that's it.